Welcome to another deep dive, listeners. Today we're looking at chapter 28 of the Dao De Jing, a text that's, well, thousands of years old, but still has a lot to say about living a good life even now. I'm excited to unpack it with our expert who's, well, you could say a Dao De Jing enthusiast.
It's great to be here. Thanks for having me. Chapter 28 is, it's pretty special in the Dao De Jing. It really gets into this idea that to be truly strong, you need to understand and, well, kind of balance those qualities that most people think of as opposites.
Oh, okay, I like that. So it's kind of like you can't have heads without tails on a coin.
Exactly. Laozi, the sage who we think wrote the Dao De Jing, he uses all these pairs of opposites to get that across. Masculine and feminine, light and darkness, even honor and humility.
Wow. So hold on. Instead of just seeing things in black and white, Laozi is saying there's, a whole spectrum of gray in between?
Exactly. And that's not just some abstract idea. It actually affects how we live, how we lead others, even just how we interact with the world around us. There's this one line, one of the most powerful, I think, in chapter 28. Know the masculine, yet keep to the feminine. Be the valley of the world.
Be the valley of the world. That's a really striking image. What does that even mean in the context of Taoism?
Well, picture a valley. It sits low, right? Everything flows into it. Water, sunlight, nutrients. Laozi is saying that when we embrace that kind of receptive stance, we actually become a source of strength for others. We can nourish them, support them.
Interesting. That's kind of the opposite of how we usually think about strength, isn't it? It's not about dominating or being forceful. It's about this, inner resilience, almost like a valley weathering a storm because it doesn't try to resist the natural flow.
You got it. True power, according to Laozi, often comes from yielding, from adapting to what's happening, instead of trying to, force our will onto everything.
It almost makes you rethink that whole survival of the fittest idea. Maybe it's more like survival of the most adaptable.
That's a great way to put it. Adaptability is, essential for navigating life, which, as we all know, is constantly changing. And you know what? It actually connects really well with another idea Laozi brings up in chapter 28, this concept of returning to the state of an infant.
Now, that's an interesting thought. What's the significance of an infant in Taoist philosophy?
Well, the state of an infant kind of symbolizes purity, openness. They don't have all these preconceived ideas about the world yet. Just like a baby experiences everything with fresh eyes, Laozi is saying we should try to cultivate that same sense of wonder and openness as adults.
I see. It's like that saying, the more I learn, the more I realize how much I don't know. The more we explore, the more we understand how much is still out there waiting to be discovered.
Exactly. It's about acknowledging that we don't have all the answers and being okay with that, with the mystery. And that actually ties back to this idea of balancing opposites, especially light and darkness. Laozi writes, know its whiteness, yet keep to its blackness.
Okay, so now we're bringing light and darkness into the picture. How do those concepts play into this whole idea of balance?
Think of whiteness as representing knowledge, clarity, understanding, the things we usually seek out when we're trying to become wiser. But Laozi is saying that true wisdom also means embracing the blackness, the unknown, the mysterious parts of life.
So it's not about being afraid of the unknown or trying to control every little thing. It's about, being open to the mystery.
Exactly. Recognizing that we don't have all the answers, and honestly, that's often where the most profound learning happens.
Stepping outside our comfort zones, taking risks, even when things feel uncertain, that can lead to incredible growth, self-discovery.
Precisely. And this applies to how we see ourselves, too, not just the world around us. Another pair Laozi talks about is honor and humility.
Honor and humility. Now, those seem like pretty contradictory qualities, don't they? How do you balance those?
Yeah, it might seem paradoxical, but in Taoism, those two actually complement each other. Laozi says we should acknowledge our strengths and achievements to know our honor, but at the same time cultivate humility. It keeps us grounded, prevents us from becoming arrogant.
So it's like having a healthy sense of self-worth, but not letting it go to your head?
Exactly. It's about that balance between recognizing our accomplishments, but always staying open to learning and growing. And, this is really valuable in leadership, where humility allows you to empower others and create a more harmonious environment.
It's a very different approach to leadership than that top-down command and control style we see so often, isn't it? It's about leading with wisdom, compassion, and a deep understanding of how we're all connected.
Absolutely. And all of this actually leads us to one of the most profound metaphors in chapter 28, the uncarved block.
Ooh, now you've got me intrigued. That sounds like a whole other layer to this wisdom. But before we dive into that, I'm curious, did any Western philosophers touch on these ideas of balancing opposites? Did they have similar thoughts?
There are actually some fascinating parallels. Carl Jung, the Swiss psychiatrist, he explored the concept of the anima and animus, the feminine and masculine principles that are present in everyone.
Oh, right. Jung believed that integrating those two was essential for psychological wholeness. That definitely aligns with what Laozi is saying about balance, doesn't it?
It absolutely does, and it really highlights how universal this idea is. It pops up across cultures and time periods. We even see echoes of it in other Western philosophical traditions.
Like where?
Well, existentialist philosophers like Jean-Paul Sartre, they put a lot of emphasis on authenticity. Part of that, they argued, is acknowledging and integrating those, darker aspects of ourselves, like our fears and doubts. And that resonates with what Laozi says about keeping to the blackness, embracing the unknown, and those parts of ourselves we tend to shy away from.
So it's about accepting the whole spectrum of our human experience, both the light and the shadow.
Yes. And the Stoics offer another interesting perspective. They believe that true happiness comes from focusing on what we can control, our thoughts, actions, attitudes, and accepting what we can't.
Which, when you think about it, ties back to that Taoist principle of yielding and flowing with the natural order of things.
Exactly. It really is remarkable how all these ancient ideas from different cultures, they end up converging on these similar truths about human nature, about our place in the universe.
Well, this deep dive has already been so insightful. We've covered a lot of ground already. Balancing opposites, the metaphor of the uncarved block, even the principle of wu wei. It's like we've been given a whole new set of lenses to view the world with.
And to view ourselves.
You're right. But before we get too lost in all this philosophical pondering, I have to ask, how does all of this actually translate to, practical advice for living in today's world? What are some concrete ways we can apply these teachings to find more peace, happiness, even just more fulfillment?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? It's one thing to understand these concepts intellectually, but how do we actually put them into practice? The Dao De Jing isn't just some abstract philosophy, it's a guide for how to live.
Okay, so where do we begin?
We start with that awareness we were talking about earlier. Remember those pairs? Masculine and feminine, light and darkness, honor and humility. Just start paying attention to how those dynamics play out in your own life.
So like noticing when I'm being overly assertive and controlling versus when I'm being more receptive and letting things unfold naturally?
Exactly. Or when you're clinging to knowledge and certainty, instead of being open to the mystery and uncertainty that's all around us. The first step is just observing these patterns without judging yourself.
It's like becoming this curious observer of our own thoughts, feelings, and behaviors.
You got it. And once you start to see those patterns, you can begin to shift them, gently. If you notice yourself constantly pushing and striving, maybe it's time to cultivate some receptivity, some stillness.
So instead of always trying to force things to happen, maybe it's more about trusting that things will work out, even if I don't have all the answers right now.
That's the heart of Wu Wei. It's aligning yourself with the flow of life instead of constantly resisting it.
It makes me think about how I deal with challenges. Instead of getting stressed and trying to control every little thing, maybe it's more about surrendering to the process, trusting that I'll learn and grow from it.
Yeah. When we approach challenges with that mindset, they become opportunities for growth. And this applies to relationships, too.
Oh, relationships. Don't get me started. Those can be tough. How does the Dao De Jing help us navigate those, create more harmony in our connections with others?
Think back to that valley metaphor. It's about being receptive, truly listening to what others have to say, valuing their needs just as much as your own. It's putting the we before the me, fostering mutual respect and understanding.
So instead of always trying to change or control people, we focus on being compassionate and accepting, meeting people where they are.
That's it. When we come from that place of understanding, it creates space for genuine connection and growth.
This is starting to feel like a roadmap to a more fulfilling life.
It is. But we have to remember that actually living these principles, it's a lifelong journey. There's no finish line. It's about constantly learning, growing, and becoming a better version of ourselves.
So it's not about reaching some impossible ideal of perfection. It's about making progress, even if it's just one small step at a time.
Exactly. Even those small changes in how we think and act, they can create a ripple effect on our own lives and the lives of those around us.
Like the butterfly effect, right? Tiny actions leading to big changes.
Exactly. Don't underestimate the power of these teachings. They might be ancient, but the wisdom they hold is timeless. And they're so relevant to the problems we're facing today, you know?
It feels like we've been given a gift, a set of tools to help us go through life with more grace, more wisdom, and more peace.
It is a gift, and it's one that keeps on giving.
Well, this has been an amazing deep dive. Any final thoughts for our listeners before we wrap up? What's one key takeaway they can take with them from our exploration of Chapter 28?
I really encourage everyone listening to take some time and explore the Dao De Jing for themselves. Each time you read it, you discover new layers of meaning. But remember, it's not just about understanding it intellectually, it's about actually living these principles in your everyday life. You know what I mean? It's about walking the walk, not just talking the talk.
So the challenge is to take these teachings off the page, bring them into our hearts and actions.
Precisely. And as you do that, you'll realize that following the Tao, it's a journey of constant wonder, growth, and transformation. And it can lead to more peace, more happiness, and more fulfillment in every area of your life.
What a beautiful thought to end on. A huge thank you to our expert for sharing their insights on Chapter 28. And to our listeners, thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you found it as insightful and inspiring as we did. Until next time, keep seeking, keep learning, and keep exploring the depths of ancient wisdom.
The uncarved block, it's such a simple image, but it has so much meaning in Taoism. Think about a piece of wood, totally untouched, pure potential. It could become anything, a table, a sculpture, even a musical instrument.
Like a blank canvas just waiting for an artist, or a seed that holds the blueprint for a whole tree.
Yeah, exactly. That's how Laozi describes the Tao itself, the source of everything. And he also uses it to represent, well, the ideal state of being for the sage, the wise person who lives in harmony with the Tao.
Okay, I'm following you. So if we see ourselves as those uncarved blocks, are we saying we're like tapping into our own pure potential, our own inherent wholeness?
That's a beautiful way to put it. It's about letting go of all those labels, roles, and expectations we pick up and just connecting with our true selves.
But Laozi isn't saying we should just stay in this uncarved state forever, is he? We still have to, live and act in the world.
Right. He says, and I'm paraphrasing here, the uncarved block becomes vessels. The sage uses them as tools to become a great leader.
Okay, so the uncarved block is the source, but it can be shaped into different vessels. And I guess those represent the roles we play in life, the things we create, the actions we take.
You got it. It's like this, the uncarved block. That's our true nature, our essence. But as we go through life, we develop skills, we take on responsibilities, we make things. Those become our vessels.
And the sage is the one who knows how to, kind of move between those two states.
Yeah.
They understand that connection to their pure potential, that uncarved block, but they can also use their skills and experience to act effectively in the world.
Yes. The sage is like a master craftsperson. They know how to shape that raw potential without, losing sight of the wholeness underneath. They aren't attached to any specific form or outcome, but they can use their knowledge to guide and shape things in a way that benefits everyone.
So they become great leaders, not by being bossy or controlling, but by really living by this principle of the uncarved block.
Exactly. For Laozi, leadership isn't about power or control in the traditional sense. It's about inspiring others through wisdom, humility, and a deep understanding that we're all connected.
That's definitely a different way of thinking about leadership than, that win at all costs mentality we see so often. It almost feels revolutionary, this idea of returning to that source of unity and wholeness, especially in a world that often seems so, fragmented and chaotic.
It is a powerful reminder that even amidst all that complexity, there's a core of simplicity and peace within us.
But how do we actually live by this principle of the uncarved block? It sounds great in theory, but how do we bridge the gap between the idea and actually putting it into practice?
Well, it starts with awareness. Notice those times when you're holding on to rigid identities, roles, expectations, when you're trying to force things or control outcomes. Just notice it.
It's like taking a step back and just observing our own patterns, seeing where we might be getting stuck, or even creating suffering for ourselves or others.
Right. And as you become more aware, you can practice letting go, embracing flexibility and acceptance.
So we cultivate those qualities we talked about earlier. Humility, being receptive, even the willingness to embrace both the light and the darkness, the masculine and the feminine.
Absolutely. It's about integrating all parts of ourselves and understanding that true strength comes from wholeness, not from trying to be just one thing or another.
This is making me rethink my whole approach to, everything. My work, my relationships, even my own personal growth. It's like realizing that our true power comes from embracing our our full humanity, all those messy, contradictory parts of ourselves.
And in that space of wholeness, that's where we connect with our unique potential and can really make a difference in the world.
You know, there's this one line in chapter 28 that keeps coming back to me. The greatest carving does not cut.
Yeah.
It seems so paradoxical.
It does, doesn't it? But Laozi often used this kind of paradoxical language to point towards a deeper truth. On the surface, it doesn't make sense, right? How can the greatest carving not involve cutting? But there's a real profound wisdom hidden in that statement.
Okay, we're to uncover that wisdom. What's the deeper meaning there?
That line, it speaks to this Taoist principle of Wu Wei, which is often translated as non-action or effortless action. It's not about passivity, it's more about acting in alignment with the natural flow of the Tao.
So instead of trying to impose our will on the world, we work with the natural order, allowing things to unfold organically.
Exactly. Think of a skilled gardener. They understand what each plant needs, they create the best conditions for growth, but they don't try to force the plants to grow in a specific way or on a specific timeline.
So it's about having that deep understanding of how everything's connected and acting in a way that supports that, the natural harmony of the universe.
That's it. That's the essence of the Taoist approach to life, to leadership, to creating a world where everyone can flourish.
This deep dive into chapter 28 has been incredible. We've explored balancing opposites, the metaphor of the uncarved block, even Wu Wei. It's like we've been given all these new ways of looking at the world.
And new ways of looking at ourselves.
You're right. But before we get too lost in all the philosophy, I'm curious, how does this all translate into practical advice for, dealing with the everyday challenges of modern life? How can we use these teachings to find more peace, happiness, just, more fulfillment in our own lives?
That's the question we all want the answer to, right?
Yeah.
And luckily, the Dao De Jing, it actually offers us some pretty practical guidance. In our next segment, we'll explore how to bring these ancient teachings into our modern lives. Stay with us. Welcome back, everyone. It's been quite a deep dive into chapter 28. We've covered a lot of ground, from balancing those seemingly opposing forces to the idea of the uncarved block, even that principle of Wu Wei. But, the real question is, how do we actually bring these ancient teachings into our modern lives? How can we use this wisdom to, live better, be happier, more at peace?
That's the big question, right? It's one thing to talk about it, but how do we actually, live it?
Right. And the beauty of the Dao De Jing is that it really is a practical guide. It's not just, abstract philosophy. So where do we even begin?
I'm all ears. Where do we start?
It all goes back to that awareness we were talking about earlier. Remember those pairs, masculine and feminine, light and dark, honor and humility? Well, start paying attention to how those dynamics are playing out in your own life, in your own experiences.
Okay, so like being aware of those times when I'm pushing too hard, being too controlling, versus those times when I'm more open and receptive, letting things just unfold naturally.
Exactly. Or noticing when you're clinging to knowledge and certainty versus, embracing the mystery, that uncertainty that's a natural part of life. The key is just to observe these patterns without judgment.
It's like becoming, a curious observer of our own thoughts and feelings and behaviors.
Exactly. And once you start to see those patterns, then you can, gently nudge them in a different direction. If you notice yourself constantly striving and pushing, maybe it's a sign to cultivate some stillness, some receptivity.
So instead of always trying to force things to go my way, I could try trusting that things will work out, even if I don't have, all the answers right now.
That's it. That's the essence of Wei, aligning ourselves with that natural flow of life instead of resisting it all the time.
It makes me think about how I approach challenges. Instead of getting stressed out and trying to control everything, maybe it's more about surrendering to the process, having faith that, I'll learn and grow from it.
That's the thing. Challenges become opportunities for growth when we approach them with that kind of mindset. And this applies to all aspects of life, even relationships.
Relationships. They can be, they can be tricky. What guidance does the Dao De Jing offer when it comes to building, stronger, more harmonious connections with others?
Remember that valley metaphor? It's all about receptivity, truly listening to what the other person is saying, valuing their needs just as much as your own. It's about, that we instead of me mentality, cultivating mutual respect and understanding.
So instead of trying to change people or, control them, it's about, being more compassionate, accepting, meeting people where they are.
Yes. And when we approach relationships that way, With that kind of understanding, it creates a space for, well, real connection, authentic connection. And that's where growth happens.
Sounds like we've been given this roadmap to a more fulfilling life.
In a way we have, but it's important to remember that, really living these principles, it's a lifelong journey. It's not a destination. It's about continuously learning, growing, becoming more aligned with the Tao.
So it's not about striving for some kind of impossible perfection. It's about progress.
Yeah.
Taking those small steps one at a time.
Exactly. Even those small shifts in how we think and act, they can create a ripple effect. They affect our own lives and the lives of everyone around us.
It's that butterfly effect, right? One tiny action can create huge changes.
Yes. So don't underestimate the power of these teachings. They may be ancient, but the wisdom they hold, well, it's timeless. And it's so incredibly relevant to the challenges we face today as individuals and as a society.
It feels like we've been given a gift, this set of tools that can help us move through life with more grace, more wisdom, more peace.
It is a gift, and it's one that keeps on giving.
Well, this has been an amazing deep dive. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and insights with us. Before we wrap up, do you have any final thoughts for our listeners? Like, what's one key takeaway they can carry with them from our exploration of Chapter 28?
I'd say dive into the Dao De Jing yourself. Read it, explore it. Each time you go back to it, you discover new layers of meaning. But remember, it's not just about understanding it intellectually. It's about bringing those teachings to life, making them a part of your everyday experience. It's about walking the walk, not just talking the talk.
So take these teachings off the page and bring them into your heart, into your actions.
Yes. And as you do that, you'll discover that the path of the Tao, it's a journey of constant wonder, growth, and transformation. And it's a journey that can lead you to more peace, more happiness, and more fulfillment in all aspects of your life.
What a beautiful thought. Thank you again for joining us on this deep dive into Chapter 28 of the Dao De Jing. And to our listeners, we hope you found this exploration as insightful and inspiring as we did. Until next time, keep seeking, keep learning, and keep exploring the depths of ancient wisdom.